Welcome back. Stack Lessons here with another round. 20 questions today, all on AWS Direct Connect, dedicated hosts BIOL compliance, and Fargate serverless containers. You'll get 10 seconds after each prompt to pick your answer before the reveal. Take your time and good luck. Let us switch gears. Question 1. Do the logic before the recall. Northwind Healthcare is migrating a legacy Windows Server application to AWS. The enterprise software vendor's license agreement requires the application to run on physical servers dedicated exclusively to Northwind Healthcare, and licensing fees are calculated based on the number of physical CPU sockets present on the host server. Which EC2 purchasing option satisfies both the physical isolation requirement and the per-socket licensing compliance requirement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Dedicated instances isolate hardware but hide the socket count. Dedicated hosts provide physical EC2 servers fully dedicated to a single customer and expose visibility into the physical socket and core configuration of the underlying hardware. This hardware-level visibility is the critical capability that enables organizations to apply existing per-socket or per-core, bring your own license agreements when migrating to AWS. Dedicated hosts are the only EC2 option that simultaneously satisfies physical host isolation and socket-level license compliance requirements. Standard reserved instances reduce costs through a 1 or 3 year commitment, but run on shared multi-tenant hardware and provide no physical host isolation or socket-level visibility required for BIOL compliance. Dedicated instances isolate EC2 instances on hardware that is not shared with other AWS customers, but they do not provide visibility into the underlying physical host socket or core configuration, disqualifying them from per-socket license compliance scenarios. Spot instances are subject to a 2-minute interruption notice when AWS reclaims capacity, making them inappropriate for production workloads with strict licensing terms and continuous availability requirements. Let's slow down here. Dedicated hosts and dedicated instances sound almost identical, but one fails the licensing test. Imagine your software vendor says, "We charge per CPU socket on the physical server, say it has 4 sockets, that's 4 licenses. To comply, you need proof of the socket count." Dedicated instances do isolate your workload. No other AWS customer shares that hardware, but AWS never shows you the socket or core count underneath. You're flying blind on the licensing audit. Dedicated hosts go one step further. You get a full physical server, and AWS tells you exactly how many sockets it has. That socket visibility is what makes bring your own license agreements work on AWS. Dedicated instances sounds right but fails the audit. Dedicated hosts is the only option that checks both boxes. Keep your focus here. Question 2. Look for the answer that fully satisfies it. During a migration readiness assessment, Relic Cloud identified 2 categories of applications in their on-premises portfolio. The first category includes 8 internal tools that have logged 0 user activity or system requests for the past 20 months, and serve no current business function. The second category includes a customer relationship management application that is available as a fully managed subscription service from a third-party vendor. Which TU migration strategies should Relic Cloud apply to these respective application categories? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. 2 apps, 2 completely different situations, 2 distinct strategies. Retire is the migration strategy of identifying and decommissioning applications that no longer serve a business purpose. Applications with 0 user activity over an extended period are prime candidates for retirement, which immediately eliminates maintenance costs, licensing fees, and operational overhead. During portfolio discovery exercises, organizations commonly find that 10 to 20% of their applications fall into this category, so retiring them reduces both migration scope and ongoing cost. Repurchase, sometimes called drop and shop, means replacing a self-managed on-premises application with a commercially available SaaS equivalent from a third-party vendor. When a mature SaaS product fully covers the required functionality, repurchase eliminates the overhead of hosting and maintaining the application internally, while moving to a subscription-based operational expenditure model. Rehosting the unused tools would migrate idle applications to the cloud with no business benefit, perpetuating unnecessary compute costs. Replatforming implies targeted cloud optimization, such as moving a database to a managed service, which is not justified for applications with no users. Refactoring the CRM application involves rebuilding it with cloud-native architecture, which is far more effort than necessary when a SaaS replacement is already available. Keep your focus here. Question 3. Solve the situation, not the keyword. Adatum Healthcare stores radiology images in Amazon S3. Images are frequently accessed for the first 30 days after upload for active diagnosis and review. Between 30 and 90 days, images are rarely accessed but must remain immediately available for compliance. After 90 days, images must be archived with retrieval required within 12 hours. The solution must minimize storage costs while meeting all access requirements. Which S3 lifecycle configuration should they implement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Map each time window directly to its access frequency tier. A lifecycle policy transitioning from S3 standard to S3 standard infrequent access at 30 days matches the access pattern where images shift from active use to rare access after initial diagnosis. S3 standard IA provides lower storage costs than standard while maintaining millisecond retrieval availability for the infrequent access window. Transitioning to S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval at 90 days covers the archive requirement, as Glacier Flexible Retrieval restores objects within 12 hours, meeting the stated retrieval window. Storing all images in S3 standard throughout the lifecycle incurs unnecessarily high storage costs for data that is rarely or never accessed after 30 days. Placing images directly into Glacier Flexible Retrieval at upload prevents the fast retrieval access needed during the active 30-day diagnosis window. Deleting images at 90 days violates the long-term regulatory retention requirement. All right. Question 4. One detail changes the answer. Fabricom Insurance needs to connect its on-premises headquarters to AWS. The requirement is a consistent private network connection with predictable latency under 10 milliseconds and sustained bandwidth of 1 gigabit per second for transferring large claims data files daily. The compliance team states that any connection routed over the public internet must use full encryption. Connections that bypass the public internet have no encryption requirement. Which connectivity solution best meets all of these requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Read the compliance rule carefully. It only applies to Internet paths. AWS Direct Connect establishes a dedicated private physical network connection between an on-premises facility and AWS that completely bypasses the public Internet. This private path delivers consistent, predictable low-latency performance and guaranteed throughput unavailable over shared Internet infrastructure. A 1 gigabit per second dedicated connection is a standard Direct Connect tier that directly meets the bandwidth requirement. Because Direct Connect does not traverse the public Internet, the compliance team's encryption requirement, which applies only to Internet-based paths, is not triggered, making Direct Connect alone the simplest and most performant solution. AWS site-to-site VPN routes encrypted IPsec traffic over the public Internet, satisfying the compliance rule for Internet-based connections but unable to guarantee consistent sub-10 millisecond latency or 1 gigabit per second throughput due to internet congestion variability. AWS Direct Connect with an IPsec VPN overlay is appropriate when encryption is mandated even on the private Direct Connect link, but the compliance policy here exempts non-internet connections, making the additional complexity unnecessary. Amazon VPC peering connects two AWS VPCs over the AWS internal network and does not extend connectivity from an on-premises data center to AWS. Let's slow down on this one. The compliance rule is the hidden trap here. Picture this. Fabricam Insurance needs to push huge claims data files to AWS every night. They want under 10 milliseconds of latency and a full 1 gigabit per second, guaranteed, not best effort. That alone rules out any VPN over the internet. Shared internet just can't promise those numbers. Now here's the real trap. The compliance rule says, encrypt traffic that travels over the public internet. Direct Connect never touches the public internet. So adding an encryption overlay on top of Direct Connect is fixing a problem that doesn't exist here. Direct Connect alone checks every box. All right, question 5. Choose for this case, not every case. Northwind IoT connects thousands of factory floor sensors that continuously transmit telemetry readings at high frequency. 3 downstream systems, a machine learning inference pipeline, an anomaly detection engine, and a long-term storage system, each need to independently read and process every sensor event in real time without competing for messages or causing other consumers to miss records. Which AWS service is best suited for ingesting this high-throughput, multi-consumer event stream? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. 3 independent consumers on the same stream rules out SQS. Amazon Kinesis data streams is designed for high-throughput, real-time data ingestion where multiple independent consumers need to read the same stream of events without interfering with each other. Each consumer maintains its own position in the stream independently, so the ML inference pipeline, anomaly detection engine, and storage system each process every record at their own pace. Kinesis retains stream data for a configurable period, supporting replay if a consumer falls behind or a new consumer is added later. Amazon SQS standard queue is a message queue where each message is delivered to a single consumer and then deleted after successful processing. Multiple downstream services would compete for the same messages rather than each independently receiving all events, making it unsuitable for the fan-out pattern required in this scenario. Amazon SNS with multiple subscriptions can deliver a copy of each published message to multiple subscribers simultaneously. However, SNS is a notification service designed for discrete push events rather than sustained high-volume continuous data streams. It does not retain messages for replay and lacks the ordered, partition-based streaming capabilities required for high-frequency sensor telemetry. AWS IoT Core is purpose-built for managing device connectivity using MQTT and other IoT protocols and handles the device-to-cloud communication layer well. However, for processing a continuous high-volume data stream with multiple independent downstream consumers performing different types of analysis, Kinesis data streams is the appropriate ingestion and distribution layer. First 5 questions hit 3 repeating patterns: dedicated hosts for per-socket BIOL licensing, Direct Connect when the compliance rule bans public internet, and Kinesis for multi-consumer fan-out that SQS cannot deliver. Okay, question 6. Read the ask, not just the topic. Tailspin Enterprises is migrating a data analytics workload from on-premises Windows Server hosts to AWS. The analytics software is licensed on a per-socket basis using Microsoft licenses the company has already purchased. The compliance team requires documented visibility into the physical socket count and core count of the underlying server for software license audits. Which EC2 purchasing option meets both the licensing model and compliance reporting requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Same per socket pattern as before, socket visibility is the key. EC2 dedicated hosts provision, a physical server dedicated exclusively to a single customer's use, and provide full visibility into the host's socket count, core count, and host ID. This visibility is required when running software with per socket or per core licensing models such as Windows Server, SQL Server, or Oracle, enabling customers to bring their own existing licenses and demonstrate licensing compliance during audits. On-demand instances run on multi-tenant physical hardware shared with other AWS customers, and the underlying host identity, socket count, and core count are not exposed to the customer, making license compliance reporting by socket impossible. Standard reserved instances commit to a specific instance type and provide a billing discount over on-demand pricing, but they also run on shared multi-tenant hardware without dedicated host visibility. Spot instances use spare EC2 capacity priced dynamically and can be interrupted with a 2-minute notice, making them unsuitable for production analytics workloads that must run continuously. Spot instances also run on shared hardware without dedicated host visibility. Here we go. Question 7. Several choices sound plausible. A newly hired cloud administrator at a Datum Corp has been granted IAM administrator permissions. Their manager asks them to perform several account setup tasks. Which 2 tasks require root user credentials and cannot be performed using IAM administrator access? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. 2 account-level actions only the root user can perform. Closing an AWS account and changing the account email address are root-only tasks that cannot be delegated to any IAM user, even those with administrator access policies. These actions affect the fundamental identity and lifecycle of the account itself, and require direct authentication as the root user. Creating IAM users, enabling AWS Cloud Trail, and launching EC2 instances are all standard administrative actions that IAM administrators with appropriate permissions can perform without root credentials. Here we go. Question 8. Do not answer a different question. A company runs a news website that receives low baseline traffic but experiences massive spikes during major breaking news events. During a spike, the infrastructure must automatically provision additional servers within minutes, and then automatically release those resources once traffic returns to normal levels. Which AWS cloud characteristic best describes this automatic bidirectional resource adjustment? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Bidirectional automatic adjustment, scale up and then back down. Elasticity specifically refers to the ability to automatically scale resources both upward when demand increases and downward when demand decreases, releasing unused capacity. A news spike that triggers automatic provisioning followed by automatic deprovisioning when traffic normalizes is the definitive elasticity scenario. Scalability is the broader ability to handle increased load and may involve manual intervention or one-directional capacity growth. It does not imply automatic release of resources when demand drops. High availability refers to minimizing downtime through redundancy and failover mechanisms, ensuring systems remain accessible despite component failures. Fault tolerance describes the ability to continue operating with zero downtime, even when individual components fail, which is a more stringent and expensive property than high availability and does not describe resource scaling behavior. Next up, question 9. Keep the constraints in view. A machine learning team at a Datum Corp runs distributed training jobs on a fleet of 12 EC2 instances. Each training run requires all 12 instances to simultaneously read the same 300 GB training dataset using standard POSIX file access patterns. The dataset is updated between training runs but never during a run. Which AWS storage service best meets this requirement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. EBS multi-attach is the tempting distractor but has a hidden restriction. Amazon Elastic File System provides a fully managed, elastic NFS file system that supports concurrent mounting on thousands of EC2 instances across multiple availability zones. All 12 training instances can read the shared 300 GB dataset simultaneously using standard POSIX semantics, and the dataset can be updated between runs without any reattachment or reconfiguration. Using separate EBS GP3 volumes with restored snapshots requires copying 300 GB to each instance before every training run, consuming time, I/O bandwidth, and 3.6 TB of total storage across 12 instances. Amazon EBS multi-attach is limited to IO1 and IO2 volume types, is restricted to instances within a single availability zone, and requires applications to explicitly manage concurrent write coordination. It is not designed for broad concurrent read sharing across a large fleet. Downloading the dataset from S3 to each instance at job start wastes startup time, requires adequate local storage on every instance, and results in 3.6 TB of redundant data transfer for every training run. Next up, Question 10. Separate fact from assumption. Fabricam Incorporated opened a new AWS account in February 2026 to support a production SaaS application. The operations team requires 24/7 access to AWS support engineers for production issues, a guaranteed response time of 4 hours or less for production system impairments, and programmatic access to all trusted advisor checks via the AWS Support API. Which support plan meets all requirements at the lowest cost? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Business Support was replaced for new accounts in late 2025. AWS Business Support Plus is the appropriate plan for new AWS accounts needing 24/7 engineer access, production response times under 4 hours, and full programmatic trusted advisor access via the Support API. As of December 2025, AWS Developer Support and the original AWS Business Support are no longer available for new account subscriptions, making Business Support Plus the entry-level plan that provides 24/7 technical support access and sub-4-hour response times for production impairments. AWS Basic Support does not include access to support engineers or programmatic trusted advisor API access beyond the 6 core checks. AWS Enterprise Support provides additional capabilities such as a technical account manager, concierge support, and 15-minute response for business-critical outages, but costs significantly more than Business Support Plus and exceeds what is required here. Let's slow down here. The December 2025 support plan changes are a real exam trap. Imagine you're the new hire at a startup. Your manager gives you 3 must-haves: 24/7 engineers on call, a 4-hour response guarantee for production outages, and full API access to Trusted Advisor. Easy list. But here's the twist. AWS rewrote its support lineup on December 2, 2025. New accounts can no longer sign up for the old developer or business plans. The tier ladder now goes: Free Basic, then Business Support Plus, then Enterprise. Business Support Plus checks every box at the lowest price. Enterprise also qualifies, but it adds a dedicated technical account manager and a 15-minute critical outage response. You don't need those, and Enterprise starts at $5,000 a month. That's the trap. Don't overbuy. Dedicated hosts appeared twice. The batch is testing socket visibility versus isolation. Business Support Plus replaces the legacy business plan for new accounts, and that name change is an active exam trap. Now, question 11. The clue is not in the service name. Conteso Software is migrating a containerized microservices application to AWS. The development team has no Kubernetes expertise and wants to avoid managing any container orchestration infrastructure. The company requires automatic scaling and load balancing with minimal operational overhead. Which AWS compute service best meets these requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. EKS with Fargate profiles still requires Kubernetes knowledge to deploy. Amazon ECS with the AWS Fargate launch type provides fully managed container orchestration without requiring Kubernetes knowledge. Fargate eliminates the need to provision, manage, or scale EC2 instances. AWS handles all underlying compute infrastructure. ECS integrates natively with Application Load Balancer for traffic distribution, and with auto-scaling for demand-based capacity adjustment. Amazon EKS requires Kubernetes expertise to manage clusters, configure networking, deploy workloads, and troubleshoot issues, creating significant operational overhead for a team without that background. Even using EKS with Fargate profiles still requires Kubernetes knowledge to configure deployments, services, and ingress controllers. Running Docker directly on EC2 instances provides no built-in orchestration, load balancing, or automatic scaling capabilities. Now, question 12. Prioritize the stated requirement. A company is decommissioning a data center that holds 180 terabytes of product catalog images and transaction archives. The facility's internet uplink operates at 150 megabits per second. The IT director calculated that uploading all data over the internet would require approximately 5 months, but the data center lease expires in 6 weeks. Which AWS service should the team use to complete the migration within the required timeframe? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. 5 months over the wire, 6-week deadline, only offline transfer works. AWS Snowball Edge Storage optimized devices are rugged physical appliances that AWS ships to the customer site. Data is loaded directly onto the device at local network speeds, bypassing the internet connection entirely. Once loaded, the device is shipped back to AWS, where the data is rapidly ingested into Amazon S3. A single Snowball Edge device holds up to 80 terabytes of usable storage, and multiple devices can be used in parallel for larger datasets. This approach can transfer 180 terabytes to AWS well within the 6-week window regardless of internet link speed. The general guideline is that if transferring data over the network would take more than 1 week, offline physical transfer with the Snow family is the recommended approach. AWS Data Sync is a high-performance online transfer service that operates over the internet or direct connect. It cannot overcome the fundamental throughput ceiling of a 150 megabits per second internet link, which is too slow to move 180 terabytes in 6 weeks. Amazon S3 Transfer Acceleration optimizes routing for internet uploads using CloudFront edge locations to reduce latency, but it cannot increase throughput beyond the available internet bandwidth, and provides only modest improvement over a slow link. AWS Storage Gateway with File Gateway provides ongoing hybrid cloud file access with local caching and background sync. It is designed for persistent hybrid storage patterns, not one-time high-volume data center migrations against a hard deadline. Let us keep moving. Let's work question 13. Quick check. Adatum Retail is building a suite of microservices for their e-commerce backend. Each microservice is packaged as a Docker container. The engineering team wants to run these containers on AWS without provisioning, managing, or patching any EC2 instances, virtual machines, or cluster infrastructure. They require automatic scaling and want to be billed only for the vCPU and memory resources consumed while container tasks are actively running. Which AWS service should they use? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. No EC2 to manage, build only while container tasks are running. Amazon ECS with the Fargate launch type is a serverless compute option for containers that removes the need to provision, configure, patch, or scale EC2 instances or cluster infrastructure. AWS Fargate allocates the exact compute resources each container task requires, and customers are billed per vPU and memory consumed during task execution. When tasks stop, billing stops. This matches the requirement to run Docker containers without managing any underlying servers. Amazon EC2 with a user-managed Docker runtime requires the team to provision instances, install and maintain the Docker engine, manage instance capacity planning, and apply OS patches. This directly contradicts the requirement to avoid managing infrastructure. Amazon EKS with self-managed worker node groups requires provisioning EC2 instances as Kubernetes worker nodes and managing their lifecycle, patching, and scaling, adding significant operational overhead beyond serverless Fargate. AWS Elastic Beanstalk with the Docker platform abstracts some infrastructure management, but still provisions EC2 instances underneath, meaning the team must manage instance types and capacity rather than achieving fully serverless container execution. Let us keep moving. Question 14. Every phrase counts. Northwind Corp is beginning its cloud transformation journey using the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework, CAF. An assessment reveals that the organization lacks defined cloud roles, has no training curriculum for engineers, and its change management process for adopting new technologies is immature. Which CAF perspective should Northwind Corp prioritize to address these gaps? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Governance covers audit and compliance, not training or role readiness. The people perspective of the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework addresses organizational change management, resource management, training and skills development, leadership, and cultural evolution. Gaps in cloud role definitions, training curricula, and technology adoption change management fall directly within the people perspective scope. The business perspective focuses on financial management, portfolio management, and ensuring cloud investments align with business outcomes, not on talent development or organizational readiness. The governance perspective covers audit and compliance, risk management, and business process governance. These are oversight and control functions, not capability building functions for workforce readiness. The operations perspective focuses on IT service delivery, application and infrastructure management, and incident response, operational run the business activities rather than organizational talent development. Time for another one. Question 15. The verb matters here. Lambda Financial operates an on-premises data center and needs a network connection to AWS for processing sensitive financial transactions. The compliance team has explicitly prohibited routing any transaction data over the public internet. Which AWS connectivity option satisfies this requirement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Prohibited from the public internet, only one option never touches it. AWS Direct Connect establishes a dedicated, private physical network connection between an on-premises facility and AWS that completely bypasses the public internet. Traffic travels exclusively over a private link, providing consistent bandwidth, predictable latency, and satisfying compliance requirements that prohibit internet-routed traffic. AWS site-to-site VPN encrypts traffic using IPsec tunnels, but those tunnels travel over the public internet, data traverses shared internet infrastructure, which does not meet a compliance prohibition on internet routing. Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery network that caches and serves content closer to end users, and is not a connectivity solution between on-premises data centers and AWS. AWS Transit Gateway with inter-region peering connects VPCs and transit gateways across AWS regions using AWS's private backbone, but does not extend connectivity from on-premises facilities to AWS and still requires an underlying transport, such as Direct Connect or VPN. Fargate appeared twice with identical reasoning: no server management, pay per task. Direct Connect has appeared 3 times. When any question bans public internet traversal, stop looking at the other options. Time for another one. Question 16. Let the constraints drive the choice. Tailspin Research Institute runs large-scale genomic data analysis jobs on Amazon EC2. Each job takes 4 to 6 hours to complete. The institute has implemented checkpointing so that jobs can resume from the last saved state if the instance is interrupted. The institute operates on a tight research budget and wants to minimize compute costs as much as possible. Which EC2 purchasing option provides the greatest cost savings for this workload? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Checkpointing signals the workload is designed to survive interruption. Spot instances allow customers to access unused Amazon EC2 capacity at discounts of up to 90% compared to on-demand pricing. When AWS needs to reclaim that capacity, it provides a 2-minute interruption notice. Because the genomic jobs use checkpointing to save progress and can resume from the last saved state, they are an ideal spot workload. The interruption risk is handled by the application design, and the cost savings are maximized. On-demand instances carry no discount and are most appropriate for unpredictable workloads that cannot tolerate interruption. Reserved instances with a 1-year term provide meaningful savings, but require a capacity commitment and offer far less savings than Spot for fault-tolerant, interruptible workloads. Dedicated hosts are designed for licensing compliance scenarios where the customer needs control of the underlying physical server and carry a premium cost, not a discount. Ready. Question 17. Test each option against the full ask. A security engineer at Conteso Media needs to block all network traffic from a known malicious IP address block at the subnet boundary of their VPC. The engineer also needs to ensure that legitimate application users can send requests and receive responses without requiring the engineer to manually define rules for inbound return traffic. While designing these controls, the engineer reviews the behavioral differences between the 2 primary VPC access control mechanisms. Which TU statements accurately describe network access control lists? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option C. Option A says stateful, that describes security groups, not NACLs. Network ACLs are stateless, meaning they do not track connection state. Every packet is evaluated independently against the numbered rule list in both directions. If an inbound rule permits traffic on port 443, a corresponding outbound rule must also explicitly allow return traffic on the ephemeral port range or the response packet will be blocked. Rules are processed in ascending numerical order, and the first matching rule is applied. Network ACLs operate at the subnet level and support both explicit ALLO and explicit DENY rules. This makes them effective for blocking specific IP address ranges at the subnet boundary, a control that is not available with security groups. Security groups are stateful, not network ACLs. Return traffic for allowed inbound connections is automatically permitted by security groups without a separate outbound rule. Security groups support only allow rules and cannot explicitly deny traffic from individual addresses, making them complementary to but distinct from network ACLs. Network ACLs apply to subnets and affect all resources within those subnets, not individual EC2 instances. This one has a sneaky trap in the stem. The return traffic clue points you toward the wrong service. Picture this. You get a list of 50 malicious IP addresses and your job is to slam the door on every one at the subnet level. That's a NACL, a Network Access Control List. The question mentions return traffic flowing without manual rules. That sounds great. But here's the thing. That's what security groups do. NACLs are stateless. Every packet, inbound or outbound, needs its own rule. The phrase subnet boundary is your clue that NACLs, not security groups, are the right tool. And because NACLs support explicit DNI rules, blocking those 50 IPs is exactly what they're built for. Let us switch gears. Question 18. Read this one twice. Litware Corp is selecting an AWS support plan for its production e-commerce platform. The company requires 24/7 technical support accessible via phone, email, and chat, full access to all AWS Trusted Advisor checks across all categories, and a response time under 1 hour for production system outages. The company wants to meet all requirements at the lowest possible monthly cost. Which AWS support plan should Litware Corp select? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Match each stated requirement to the cheapest plan that covers it. AWS Business Support Plus is the lowest cost plan that satisfies all 3 stated requirements. It provides 24/7 technical support via phone, email, and chat, full access to all AWS Trusted Advisor checks across all 5 check categories, including cost optimization, security, fault tolerance, performance, and service limits, and a response time of under 1 hour for production system down scenarios. AWS Basic Support provides no technical support cases beyond billing and account questions and grants access to only 7 core Trusted Advisor checks, falling short on all 3 requirements. AWS Enterprise On-Ramp and AWS Enterprise Support both exceed the 3 stated requirements, but cost significantly more than Business Support Plus. Enterprise On-Ramp adds a shared pool of technical account managers and a 30-minute response time for business-critical system failures, while Enterprise Support adds a dedicated technical account manager and 15-minute response for business-critical outages. Neither set of additional capabilities is required by the stated requirements, making both unnecessarily expensive choices compared to Business Support Plus. Let us switch gears. Question 19. The condition is doing work. Contesso Financial Services runs a high-frequency trading platform. The system requires a private, dedicated network connection between its on-premises data center and AWS that guarantees consistent bandwidth and low, predictable latency. The compliance team has stated that trading data must not traverse the public internet under any circumstances. Which connectivity option meets these requirements? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Direct Connect is private by default but not encrypted by default. AWS Direct Connect provides a dedicated, private network connection from an on-premises facility directly to AWS, completely bypassing the public internet. It delivers consistent bandwidth, low and predictable latency, and private connectivity, meeting both the performance requirements of high-frequency trading and the compliance mandate that prohibits public internet traversal. AWS Site-to-Site VPN creates an encrypted IPsec tunnel, but the tunnel routes over the public internet. Regardless of the encryption strength, the path crosses shared public infrastructure, which directly violates the compliance requirement. Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery network designed for caching and accelerating web content to end users. It does not provide private connectivity between an on-premises data center and AWS. AWS Transit Gateway with VPN attachments uses VPN connections that also route over the public internet, failing the same compliance requirement as site-to-site VPN. Note that Direct Connect itself does not encrypt traffic by default. If encryption in transit were also required, a VPN overlay or MACsec would be added on top of Direct Connect. Let's pause on this one. The difference between private and encrypted trips a lot of people. Imagine you run a trading desk that processes 50,000 orders a second. You can't have the internet slow down a single one. That's the Direct Connect pitch. A physical cable from your data center to AWS. It never touches the public internet. Think of it like a private toll road versus a city highway. Consistent bandwidth, predictable latency, no other traffic. Here's the trap the exam loves. Direct Connect is private, but not encrypted by default. If you need encryption too, add MACsec, a layer 2 encryption standard, or a VPN overlay on top. Private path? Direct Connect wins every time. Keep your focus here. Question 20. The wording is the clue. Contesso Corp has been running an on-premises customer relationship management system for 12 years. The IT team spends approximately 40% of their time on routine server patching and database maintenance for this system. Leadership wants to eliminate this operational burden entirely by adopting a commercially available, vendor-hosted CRM solution, where the third-party provider manages all hosting, maintenance, and upgrades. Which of the 7 migration strategies does this decision represent? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Vendor manages everything. That is repurchasing, not replatforming. Repurchase, also called drop and shop, is the migration strategy of replacing a custom-built or on-premises application with a commercially available software as a service product from a third-party vendor. The defining characteristic is that the company stops operating the application entirely and instead subscribes to an equivalent service hosted and maintained by the vendor, transferring operational responsibility completely. Adopting a vendor-hosted CRM to eliminate maintenance overhead is the textbook example of this strategy. Rehost, commonly called lift and shift, moves the existing application to cloud infrastructure with no changes to code or architecture. The team retains full responsibility for operating the system, and the operational burden is unchanged. Re-platform, sometimes called lift, tinker and shift, preserves the core application architecture while making targeted optimizations such as moving a self-managed database to a managed service like Amazon RDS. It optimizes without rebuilding, and the company retains application ownership rather than transferring it to a vendor. Refactor or re-architect involves rebuilding the application from the ground up, using cloud-native patterns such as microservices or serverless functions, requiring significant development investment, the opposite of reducing operational effort by switching to an off-the-shelf SaaS alternative. 3 takeaways from this session. First, dedicated hosts expose socket count for BIAL audits. Dedicated instances isolate hardware but hide host topology. Second, 3 Direct Connect questions share one signal, prohibit internet routing, and Direct Connect wins every time. Third, Fargate removes EC2 management entirely. Business Support Plus is the lowest plan with 24/7 support and Trusted Advisor API. Every pattern in this session, private connectivity, per-socket licensing, and serverless containers, came paired with a near-miss distractor. You've now seen all 3 from multiple angles. That exposure is exactly what the exam will test you on.